90 days. We're going to work that out. We're not going to ding your credit, and we're going to tack it onto the back end. But for if you're doing that with your electric bill, with your natural gas, with your cell phone, et cetera, your internet provider, those bills are all going to be due in full. There's no tacking it onto the back end of the loan. You're just deferring that. And if it's a $100 a month bill, you're deferring it for 3 months. Well, in 3 months, you owe $300 plus that next month.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. But to be fair, if you're out of work for a month and then you get your unemployment plus your $600 somewhere down the road, in theory, you're going to be made whole. And in theory, then when you're made whole, you'll go back and pay those bills. Not take that money and go buy an 80-inch flat screen.
Correct. And I think, again, the utilities are being prudent in that. It's a good thing, and they will get their money. But for the individual on the financial side, just don't forget that. You still do owe that money. And if you're sitting there and you haven't paid, you deferred your electric bill for 90 days and you're sitting there with $200 extra, maybe you should send 100 of it into the electric company.
Yes, or at the very least, set it aside for when it all comes due.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good. And if you know, and be honest with yourself, if you know that's a problem for you, you have a problem setting it aside, then send it in.
Exactly. That way you're done, and you won't be tempted.
Right, and you're not going to get blindsided when you get that electric bill. Oh my gosh, how do I pay $450 electric bill? Well, you need to do that. You're also seeing one great benchmark in the economy, like you do here. If you're a baseball fan and you want to know how your favorite baseball player is doing, you're going to look at some quick stats. What's their batting average? How many home runs they got, et cetera, right?
Correct.
It doesn't tell you everything, but tells you plenty. Guy's hitting 320 in July, and he's got 22 home runs. He's having a great year. No, you don't need to know a whole lot more. So one of the things financially is the 10-year Treasury. The 10-year U.S. Treasury, considered to be risk-free, okay, because the U.S. has never defaulted, typically pays around 4%. For the last several years, paid closer to 2%. Now, I think it's closed today at around 0.56%.
That's about what I was going to say. Somewhere around 0.6% is what I saw this morning.
Yep. So you give me your money, you give me $10,000, and I'm going to pay you 0.6% every year for 10 years, and then give you your $10,000 back.
Yeah.
But what that's telling you, here's why it's so low. It's because they are sold at an auction. So when you go to an auction, right, and you have a lot of buyers, I don't care, you're going to a farm auction and you want to buy the tractor, right, and you got 10 tractor buyers there, that tractor's going to sell for a lot of money, right?
Right.
Because you have a lot. All right. Well, in the Treasury auction, it's kind of like how low will that percentage rate go to where people will stop buying it? Well, they're saying, hey, we'll pay you 0.6, and people are going, sold.
There's no reason to raise
sold because they don't, because they can sell it at that. And what people are buying it at that because they want security and they want safety. This isn't Bob and Sally on Main Street. This is huge institutional things. This is massive amounts of money. But you've got low interest rates. You're going to have low interest rates. That's not going to change. It's only been, I've had this belief for several years, but it's only going to be exacerbated by all this. Because of the unknown, when there's turmoil in markets, people, and by people I really mean institutional, huge money, tends to flee to safety. People want to know, where am I going to be safe? And enough people are willing to take 0.6% for 10 years.
Since you brought up personal finance, let me ask another question, and this has to do with the financial ramification of the COVID-19 pandemic, because the stock market has taken a dump, and it's not because the economy went bad. It's not because people stopped buying things. Demand went down, production went down, efficiencies went down. It's because we raised our hands and said, okay, this is a bad thing, this pandemic. We are going to voluntarily shut this down. So the stock market has just gone horribly. Anyone with a 401k, if you've looked at it, you've probably cried.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to the individual who said, okay, I've got X in my 401k,
yeah,
and it's now a percentage of X. So what would you do with that individual that said, okay, it's time for me just to sell everything, get out, and then buy a 10-year treasury where I'm guaranteed to get 0.6%? What would you tell that individual?
Number one, you need to tell me how old you are, because if you're 62, selling everything might not be a bad idea. If you're 35, hey, come on, you're going to recover from this. Always have. Okay. First of all, also remember, if you sell in your 401k or in your IRA, whether it's a traditional or Roth, there are zero tax repercussions for selling and taking a gain, and there's zero tax advantages for taking a loss. So that's very important to keep in mind. But what do I tell that person? I think I tell that person, how old are you? What are your goals? How soon do you need the money? I need the money in a year or two. Okay. You might want to think about reducing your exposure significantly. The market, in my opinion, was oversold anyway at 29.5. The price to earning ratio on the Dow was high. So while I think it's going to recover, I think it's going to be a while till it gets back up there because it was higher than it probably should have been, in my opinion.
So this V curve that they're talking about, that some were talking about, I should say, where it's going to raise as quickly as it drops, you don't see that happening?
I don't think so. I think it might come back quickly to a point, but I don't think it's going back to pushing 30,000 soon. And I could be dead wrong, but the guy who tells you it's dropping to 10,000, he doesn't know either. Nobody knows. Mm-hmm. Anybody who tells you with 100% certainty, I can just tell you my belief. My belief is that it will come back. It's not going to 29,000, 30,000 anytime soon. The other thing is, even if you're 35, you open that 401k statement, and now you have angst. You can't sleep at night. You've got acid reflux. You're stressed. You got a pit in your gut. Sell it all. Go to cash. You need to sleep. Your personal health is worth more than anything else. If you can't stomach it, get out and just get in later. And that goes contrary to what virtually everybody in my industry would tell you. But I would tell you your personal well-being is very, very important. If you can look at it and go, I had X in there, now I have X minus 23%. I don't like it. Nobody likes it. But you know what? I'm 38 years old. I'm 52 years old. I've got another 10, 15, 20 years, whatever it is. I'm going to recover. That's fine.
And that's based on history.
That's based on history. Yes. Yes. I still believe in the United States of America. I believe in our markets. I believe in the opportunity. But one of the reasons you're seeing all this volatility is that, like we talked about earlier in this discussion, change is coming. And nobody quite knows what it is.
Yeah, and by change, you don't mean Armageddon.
Correct.
Things are going to be different.
Things are going to be different. I believe this. In 3 years from now, you're still going to walk into Walmart. You're going to be able to get pretty much what you want. You're going to be able to get onto Amazon or some other site and buy what you want and get it. You might have one Macy's in the cities like St. Louis instead of 4.
Yeah. Well, and even
that's going to be the change.
Even our habits. I mean, I had a conversation with somebody, and this is a gentleman who knows what he's talking about. Okay, he's when he speaks, you should listen to him just because he's a sharp guy. He made the statement that he thought that shaking hands is done. We're not doing that anymore.
I have heard other people say that, and I can absolutely see it. And again, it's a learned behavior. So the longer this goes on, so if we go 6 months without shaking hands, maybe. But if we go 2 years, you haven't done it.
Yeah, it may go away, and we may be watching 20 years from now, watching a movie that's 20 years old. Look at those people; they're shaking hands. Remember when they used to do that?
Yeah, remember when we saw Aunt Edna that we only see every other year, and you give her a big hug and kiss, and now we're just going to say, "Hey." So all those things can change. The other thing that I think, James, is important to look at. People are like, okay, well, when this ends. Okay, this ends. Well, go back to our grandparents or great-grandparents or whatever it is, depending on your age, okay, who went through this in 1918, okay? Well, 10 years after that, you entered the Great Depression. In 1929. 1930, you had the Dust Bowl. 1936, war is breaking out in Europe. 1941, we're in the war. Like, bad things can happen and build on each other. I'm not a doomsday guy, but I am just saying the old Boy Scout motto of be prepared, keep your radar off, keep what's going on, because things can, just like we were on an unprecedented long bull run up in this market, okay? But all parties end.
Well, and how many, and Kieran, how many economists said, look, I can't see anything that can disrail this. And what they meant was financially, business-wise, but then came this. And throughout history, this is what's always happened. This is what derailed economies, a war, a pandemic, some type of natural disaster, a huge drought. I mean, we are truly blessed beyond belief in this country. And I will say in this world, especially the Western world is blessed beyond belief because, and I had this conversation with my boys, and my boys are, I'm going to get this wrong, I know, and they're going to be mad. So roughly between 35 and 28, let's say, roughly, that's their ages, okay? I explained to them, so in your adult life, you've never seen hardships because, I mean, the oldest
that's correct.
Yeah, the oldest was a kid during the Great Recession. And between 2008, 2009, and 2 months ago, there were no hardships. Zero, none, not a zilch. Nothing was hard. And now we have this. This isn't.
And now we have this.
Yeah.
And we have and one of the big things that we have is uncertainty.
That's right. That's a big thing, like you said, uncertainty.
Nobody knows where it's going. Nobody knows when it ends, how people are going to react. And there's always fear of the unknown. The stock market is most volatile when it doesn't know. That's why when you see, I've spent probably a better part of the last year or so talking to a lot of investors about de-risking, and that the big risk is what we would call a black swan, meaning something comes out of nowhere that couldn't exist and happen. Well, how could that be? We're not going to have another 9/11. We had a pandemic.
Yeah, exactly.
These happen. But the emotions for the individual when they're making money are so strong because the two emotions that rule the market, and it's fear and it's greed, and they're so strong. And we think that we're not greedy, and we think we're not fearful. And if you get to that quiet spot and you reflect on yourself, we all are a little bit.
Yeah.
We just are. And it's hard to leave the game when you're winning. It's hard to think it might end. I saw a great interview with President Clinton that he probably did when he was out of office for 10 years. And he said, listen, I learned this back in Arkansas. I told Hillary, when we go to these parties that we have to go to, when we start having a really good time, that's when we need to leave.
Why did you say that?
Because from there, it can only go downhill.
Okay.
It can only, you're having a good time, you're laughing, you're joking, you're the governor, the lieutenant governor, whatever, and all of a sudden you have that one more drink or half that drink, or you let your guard down a little more and you say something, that's tomorrow's headline.
Exactly.
The same thing if you went to parties when you were 17 years old, you really wanted to leave the party about a half hour before the neighbors called the police, and you would have had a good time. And that's just true. And I remember speaking to a lot of people, and a few of them took action. Most didn't. I knew I was being a contrarian, but I also knew that all parties end. You just don't know when, and you don't know how. And this one, the brakes hit hard. We didn't coast. They got slammed on. There's still opportunity long-term for the investor. The United States is still going to be the greatest country in the history of the world. The economic opportunity coming in the next 20, 30 years is still, I believe, unprecedented to what you're going to see. But as we've spoken numerous times on this conversation, it's going to be a little different.
Yeah, and an opportunity is certainly there. I'll give you an example. Nobody could find masks, okay? Of course, the N95 masks the surgical masks are still hard to find. But during the early onset of this pandemic, they said, don't waste your time with those dopey cloth masks. They don't do any good. Then all of a sudden they said, cloth masks are good for you to wear. It's not going